work with? You work as an architect, you're working with gypsum, hard brick, concrete, things like that. We work with structures as well, but we also work with living world what we have, we deal with. We work with land, and by working with land, we just push the dirt around, creating berms, holes, hills, you name it. We work with plants. Plants have to create spaces. You can see there's a space between here. We work with structures, fences, walls, things like that. And we work with water. And water helps soften the landscape and helps out to create edges and provides, in some cases, noise control as well. Here's some examples of how water is used in parks. I don't know if you know any of these places. In Granada, Spain, they have a beautiful fountain. Very simple, not a lot, but the water here not only provides sound, it also provides a cooling effect because it's very hot in south of Spain. And that amount of water actually cools the temperature down probably about 5 to 10 degrees, which makes it actually habitable during the summertime. So water is climate control. Water's fun. This was a place not too far away from the place I lived, where they designed a new park, and it was basically a big plaza, and during the summertime, they used it for water. And then this was noise control. This was right built on a highway. And this, of course, is just a natural feature that we would like to highlight. Awesome. Plants. You all know, how many of you have been in a corn maze? Basically using plants to create walls, to channel things. And that's basically what you're doing here. Sometimes you can use plant walls. There are more and more buildings that I've seen that actually have plants growing on the walls. As you come in, you provide color and then shapes. And you can trim the plants to be exactly what you want to get certain shapes and certain sizes and certain corridors. Landforms. You've got natural landforms in many different shapes, whether it's rock, sand, man-made. In these two cases, you've all heard of Machu Picchu. How many of you know Machu Picchu? Heard of that? Why do you think they did this? To burn it? For farming, exactly. They were able, you can't farm on a hillside that's going like this, but you can farm on a flat area. And they did exactly the same thing here. You see, this is not a model, this is actually real. And why do you think they did that here? Why do you think it looks like it's terraced? What kind of plants are they growing here? Rice. Basically, you flood each one of these things. Rice floats up to the top. You harvest the rice, and then you flood it to the next one, down, down, down as you go. So you start with water on the top, and you work your way down. It's a clever way of using the landform in order to create an area that normally would be very difficult to farm, turn into a farm area. And then finally, structures. We all know structures as part of the landscape, whether they're monuments, time machines, basic sculptures, beautiful patterns on the ground, or memorials. So these are examples for a little bit of history in landscape architecture. Landscape architecture wasn't invented, wasn't really thought about that long ago. People have always been doing gardens, but they haven't done it on a monumental scale. This is a French example of, you've heard of Versailles, most of you, right? You all know Versailles? What you probably don't know is the original Versailles is this, Vaurécon. It's a very interesting story. The guy who made this garden was the finance minister for the King of France, King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Everybody told King Louis this was the most fantastic garden and house they've ever seen. Louis came and visited it one day, and then he threw the finance minister in jail and said nobody upstages the king. And he took the three people who designed this, two Andres and a Charles, and he designed Versailles with the same guys on a huge scale to say, I can do better than this. I can make Versailles because it's even bigger. Interesting story. Great Britain takes French gardens and turns them a little bit more natural. You have some shapes, you see some French influences, but then you see large vistas, large lawns, spaces like that. It's an English shaped gardens, and these came after the French gardens. Italian gardens were basically made to escape Rome and the heat. All of these gardens, the most famous gardens, are all terraced, built outside of Rome, in which the water flows down, down, down. So you got a lot of water, structure, landform, and plants. Perfect example of what you see of mixing of all four elements together. Asian gardens, Chinese, Japanese, Islamic gardens, they're all trying to achieve different things. Harmony, peace, a miniature version of the world, a comfortable place to live in a hot climate. Now, garden ideas come all over the world, can be combined. How many of you ever been to Isabella Garden Museum, Boston? You've been there? Like it? Pretty amazing, isn't it? Beautiful art museum. They have some great art in it, but at the same time, in the center of the garden, the center of the place, they have this beautiful garden. Isabella Gardner was somebody who visited Europe every summer, constantly bought art, and she loved what she saw there. She took ideas from the Palazzo Medici and from the Alhambra and combined them to make her own garden in Boston. You ever get a chance to go to Boston? This is probably the #1 museum to go visit, in my opinion, because it combines everything. Beautiful place to see. And of course, in the United States, we have our own landscape architecture, as was basically the first, was invented as a name in the United States. How many of you ever heard of Frederick Law Olmsted? No? I didn't think so. Nobody. If you don't know what landscape architecture is, you'll never know what Frederick Law Olmsted is. Frederick Law Olmsted was basically the grandfather of landscape architecture. He, with another guy, Kelvin Vaux, won a competition to design Central Park in New York. That was the first major garden that was done. It was actually a dump, and they turned it into a garden, which makes New York breathe. And people around the United States were so impressed with it that he literally built a garden in almost every single city you can name. Montreal to San Francisco, you name it. He designed gardens all in his 40 years of building gardens. And we actually have modern gardens. You've got the old, this is one of the earliest gardens in the United States, which is Central Commons. And then we have this one, which is over the highway, which was built recently in Boston as well. So we have our own traditions as well. Some examples of stuff that I've done quickly. You can see some design in here. We had a field, we had to have an entrance. There's some there's some rhyme and reason for the shape of things. You stand in the center of this circle, you'll be able to go straight there, or you go straight into the entrance, and you get the feeling for timelines, gardens. Even the simplest things, sports complexes can actually be designed. These are two high schools, one westerly, in which we connected two schools and created a whole central plaza. Then Attleboro High School, which has actually been, that's the old school, and that's the new one. That opened like about 2 years ago. So this is like, you don't know if you're Attleboro, it's a brand new high school with all laid out in terms of somebody has to design all of that, make sure it works. So, how do we start with landscape architecture? What do we use as tools? The first thing we need to know is what is existing there. And what we do is we need to know if there's floodplains, if there's water, we need to know topo, we need to know where buildings are, we need to know where streets are. So we end up with doing surveys. So all this is, surveyor is the first step of doing a lot of this stuff. You guys know what the USGS is? USGS, United States Geologic Survey. Basically, they were in charge of mapping the entire country in terms of topography, roads, and whatnot. You can still find these maps everywhere. When I was growing up, those were the only maps we really had to base everything off of. Now, of course, we all have Google Maps, and that's what we use, but that's how we started. Flood maps are important because you need to know where you can and cannot build. A lot of people are building in floodplains, not a good idea, because then you lose your money. Okay, so what is our project? Our project is going to be understanding landform. To understand landform, we're going to build some models. This is one of the first things you have to do. You have to understand contours. So this plan, which I have up here basically, we have 4 different types of shapes, lines we create. And you do this in architecture as well as you would do this in landscape. Arcs and circles, which are with radii. Right angles, which everything is a 90-degree angle. Acute or obtuse, which is everything but a right angle. And then biomorphic shapes. You guys have seen these, I imagine, right? You know what that is. I want you to notice on this plan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you each to draw one of each of these. I'm going to give you a bunch of paper. You're going to draw an example of each one of these. Arcs, circles, biomorphic. Every single line you draw has to start on one side of a paper and end on the side of a paper. It can end on the same side of the paper, like this, here and here, but it can't cross another line, and it has to be at least a half an inch away from the other line, because that's how topo works in the real world. Unless, the only reason you have a line on top of a line is if you have a cliff. We're not building cliffs today, we're only going to build real landscapes, so I want you to draw, when you draw these things, you're going to draw lines similar to this. It's got to have at least, I'd say 14 to 15 lines per paper, per design. You know, 2 lines is going to be boring and it's not going to accomplish anything. You need to have to show something that's got some diversity on it. So those are the shapes that I'm going to want you to do. And then I'm going to take an example. I'm going to turn these shapes into something three-dimensional. You guys all see this plan here, the right, left here? All 3 of these models were based on this one plan. And it depended on how I cut the shapes out and how I went up and down with the contours. So these lines don't mean anything until you actually turn them into contours. So I decided in this version that this was going to be the low point. I decided in this version that this was going to be the high point. And then this one was just flat, basically. So you're going to be able to make that choice when you choose the one. We're going to choose one of your designs, and you're going to turn it into a contour model. And this is an example of what it's going to look like. I'm going to show you 3 different versions of what this could be. Option 1, you start with a base. Cut about like that's sheet 1, that's sheet 2, that's sheet 3. So you got a low point here and it works its way up. Next version of what this could be, you got a base, and then I have just cut out on the side. And those are the lines that I ended up. It's a completely different model, but it's exactly the same lines on this piece of paper. And then finally, option 3 of those same lines can go up, 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 all the way from one corner all the way to the other end. So do you all understand a little bit about what you're going to do? The one thing I haven't explained actually before is what you're going to use is you're going to use paper and you're going to use foam core. You guys know what foam core is? Okay. Foam core is going to be your spacers between the paper layers. So when you look at this, you can see the foam core in between. Because if you just glue the paper to the paper to the paper, you're not going to see anything. It's not going to have any contours at all. In order to make it actually look like an elevation, you have to put the foam core, glue it on top of the paper before you put the next paper on. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you how I want you to create. We're going to start drawing the four examples, and then we're going to show you how to build them off. So I'm going to go back to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass the paper out.